Welcome, dear listener, to Whispers of the Night. Tonight, we invite you to leave behind the busyness of your day and step softly into a world of quiet wonder. If you haven't already, consider subscribing and joining our little community, where every night brings stories that soothe, calm, and inspire. Tonight, we journey together into the serene tale of the artist's quiet moonlight sleep, a story of imagination, creativity, and the gentle magic that flows through quiet moments. As the evening settles around you, take a deep breath, let your shoulders relax, and allow the soft whispers of this story to guide you into a peaceful space. We will wander through moonlit studios, dreamlike rivers of color, and luminous forests where imagination and reality meet. Every sound, every pause, every thread of light is here to calm your mind, ease your thoughts, and carry you gently toward rest. So, find a comfortable position, let your eyes grow heavy if they wish, and allow the night to wrap around you as our story begins. Close your eyes, dear listener, and take a slow, deep breath in, hold it gently, and release it softly, letting all tension melt away. Feel your body sinking deeper into comfort, supported by the surface beneath you. Picture a quiet studio bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, threads of silver light weaving through the air. Shadows move slowly, dancing like gentle whispers across the floor and walls. You are here with the artist, who sits quietly, brush in hand, letting imagination flow freely. With each breath, feel the serenity of the night settle over you. The air carries a delicate warmth, the faint scent of paint, wood, and paper mingling like a soft lullaby. Notice the subtle glow on the surfaces around you, the glimmer on the easel, the shimmer of sketchbooks resting quietly nearby. Each object holds a story, a memory, a gentle presence. Now imagine moonlight spilling across a flowing river, reflecting silvery ripples, glimmering like tiny threads of light. Let your mind drift with these threads, following them as they weave through forests of glowing trees and meadows of soft, luminescent flowers. Each breath takes you deeper, every heartbeat a quiet rhythm guiding you toward calm. Notice the presence of the dreamlike muse, hovering near, not speaking, yet gently inspiring. Its quiet energy flows through the room, into your mind, into your senses. Allow this peaceful companion to guide you, to remind you that every line, every thought, every vision has space to breathe. As you sink further into this serene world, colors and light swirl around softly liquid silver rivers, floating petals, and glowing trees. Feel yourself carried gently along, weightless.calm and free. The whispers of the night invite you to simply exist, to let go of worries, and to allow creativity and wonder to flow like a gentle stream. Your breath remains slow and steady, your body heavy and calm, your mind drifting, floating softly, embraced by this luminous serenity. There is no need to do anything, no need to think, only to relax, to listen, and to let the soft magic of the night carry you toward rest. The artist's quiet moonlight. The moonlit studio and the stillness of the night, when the world outside seemed to pause in soft anticipation. The artist sat quietly in their studio, surrounded by the gentle hum of their own thoughts. The room was small, yet inviting, filled with the comforting clutter of a life devoted to creation. Canvases leaned lazily against the walls, each one holding fragments of imagined worlds, fleeting memories, and colors that had yet to find their full expression. Brushes of various sizes were scattered across a worn wooden table, some bristling with fresh paint, others dry and stiff from long hours of use. Tubes of oil and watercolor lay open, their contents glinting faintly in the muted glow of the moonlight that streamed through the large windows. The moon hung high in the sky, a luminous guardian casting silver light over the quiet streets outside. Its glow entered through the tall, arched windows, spilling across the studio floor and bathing the room in a calm, otherworldly glow. Shadows flickered softly against the walls as the moonlight touched every corner, revealing tiny details. The daylight often overlooked a small patch of peeling paint on the window frame, a speck of dust dancing lazily in the air. The delicate curve of a ceramic cup, leaning slightly forward, fingers lightly brushing the edge of a canvas resting on an easel. Their eyes followed the gentle shifting of moonlight across the surface, noticing the subtle way it changed the shades and textures of the colors already painted there. They breathed in slowly, deliberately, as if trying to capture the very essence of the night, to infuse it into their art. The silence of the studio was complete, but it was not heavy or oppressive. It was a quiet, thoughtful silence, like a soft blanket that wrapped around the artist, encouraging reflection and stillness. The distant sound of the town was nearly imperceptible, a soft rustle of leaves, the faint hum of a lamp in a faraway house, the occasional bark of a dog that quickly faded into the distance. Inside, the artist's world existed entirely in the delicate interplay of light and shadow, color and shape, presence and imagination. Each brushstroke they considered seemed to hum with quiet possibility, each empty space on the canvas a doorway to something yet to be discovered. The artist's routine at night was a slow, meditative process. First came the careful preparation of their materials, organizing brushes by size and purpose, squeezing fresh paint onto a palette, mixing colors until they reached the precise shade they envisioned. Then came the sketching, the tentative lines that mapped the shape of a dream onto the canvas. The artist moved with care, letting their mind wander gently over memories, hopes, and fleeting thoughts, allowing the subconscious to guide their hand. Sometimes they would pause to gaze out the window, watching the moonlight shimmer on the rooftops of neighboring buildings, or tracing the delicate patterns of frost that had begun to form on the edges of the glass. The studio itself was a reflection of the artist's mind, orderly in some places, chaotic in others, but always filled with intention. A small wooden chest against one wall held unused pencils, sketchbooks, and scraps of paper covered with doodles and notes. On a shelf above it sat a collection of tiny trinkets, a carved wooden bird, a glass marble that caught the light like a miniature sun, a small stone smoothed by years of handling. These objects seemed to hold their own quiet stories, adding to the sense that the studio was alive in a gentle, almost magical way. The artist's gaze fell again on the canvas before them. Tonight, they were drawn to a scene of quiet reflection, a lone figure sitting beneath the moon, surrounded by the gentle sway of trees and the shimmer of distant lights. The scene was not entirely of this world. It was infused with a dreamlike quality, as though the moonlight itself had lent its essence to the image. The artist picked up a fine brush, dipped it lightly into a pool of silver-white paint, and traced a delicate line along the edge of the figure's cloak. Each stroke was careful, deliberate, yet fluid, capturing not only the shape, but the feeling of the night as they worked. The artist felt a subtle restlessness, a quiet longing that had become familiar over the years. It was not discomfort or dissatisfaction, but a gentle yearning for something just beyond reach, feeling that inspiration and peace were always slightly ahead, waiting to be discovered in the folds of the night. They leaned back in the chair for a moment, letting the brush rest on the table, and closed their eyes. In the darkness behind their eyelids, they could see the shapes of their dreams, shifting and dancing in soft patterns of light and color. The moonlight streaming through the window seemed to respond, spilling more generously across the room, as if to encourage the artist to continue their journey through imagination. Minutes passed like this in quiet companionship, the artist moving between the canvas, the window, and the scattered tools around them. Occasionally, they would pause to pick up a sketchbook, flipping through pages filled with half-formed ideas, notes, and observations. Each page was a fragment of the artist's inner world, a small testament to the nights spent watching shadows lengthen and the moon climb higher in the sky. They found comfort in these fragments, as though each one were a whisper from a distant, gentle voice guiding them through the night. Outside, the world remained hushed. The streets were empty, the trees swayed softly in the cool night air, and the stars glimmered faintly in the sky beyond the windows. The artist's heart beat in quiet rhythm with this stillness, a gentle reminder that they were part of something larger, something timeless. The moonlight, steady and unwavering, seemed to illuminate not only the studio, but the quiet corners of the artist's mind, revealing thoughts and feelings that had lain hidden in daylight hours. There was a particular joy in the way the night unfolded around the artist, a joy that came not from grandeur or excitement, but from the simple, profound beauty of being awake, aware, and alive in the presence of quiet magic. The soft scratch of brush against canvas, the faint smell of paint and turpentine mingling with the cool night air, the gentle glow of moonlight reflecting on every surface, these were the small, treasured moments that gave the artist a sense of purpose and peace. As the hours passed, the artist's movements became slower, more deliberate, almost ritualistic. They applied color with care, blended shades with gentle patience, and stepped back frequently to observe the canvas from a slight distance. In these moments, they felt a connection not only to their own work, but to the quiet pulse of the night itself. The moonlight seemed to linger on the edges of the canvas, highlighting details the artist might otherwise have missed, as though the night itself were an invisible collaborator. At one point, the artist set down the brush entirely and allowed themselves to simply sit in the chair, gazing out at the moonlit rooftops and the silent streets below. They noticed the way the silver light made the leaves glimmer like tiny fragments of glass, how the distant church spire caught a faint reflection of the moon, and how the stars above seemed to pulse softly in time with their own breath. In these moments, the artist felt a deep sense of belonging, as though the studio, the night, and their own heart were intertwined in a delicate, harmonious dance. Time passed unnoticed, marked only by the slow shifting of shadows and the gradual movement of the moon across the sky. The artist's eyes began to grow heavy, but their mind remained alert, floating between wakefulness and the gentle pull of dreams. The canvas before them now seemed to shimmer softly, as if infused with the very light that had illuminated the studio all evening. The figure beneath the moon, once static, now appeared almost alive, imbued with a quiet serenity that mirrored the stillness of the room. Finally, the artist leaned back fully in their chair, letting their hands rest in their lap. The brushes lay nearby, the palette held the last traces of mixed paint, and the studio remained bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. There was no rush, no urgency, only the quiet companionship of the night, the gentle rhythm of breath, and the comforting presence of their own creations. In this simple, unhurried way, the artist felt the first stirrings of rest, a gentle easing of the mind toward the tranquility of sleep. And so, in the moonlit studio, surrounded by the echoes of imagination and the quiet magic of the night, the artist began to close their eyes. The world outside continued its hushed journey. The stars twinkled softly, and the moonlight lingered as a faithful guardian over the room. For now, the artist rested in the knowledge that inspiration could wait, that beauty could be found in the stillness, and that the quiet embrace of the night would guide them toward dreams as luminous and gentle as the moon itself. The whisper of dreams, the night deepened, and the artist remained in their studio, though now the room seemed to breathe differently. The moonlight had shifted slightly, casting longer, softer shadows across the wooden floor, tracing intricate patterns from the window frames and the scattered objects that filled the room. The silence was no longer empty. It held a subtle hum, a quiet resonance that seemed to vibrate through the air and settle gently in the corners of the studio. It was as if the night itself had awakened, inviting the artist to notice things that had always been there but had gone unseen. As the artist adjusted a brush in their hand, a flicker of movement caught their eye. At first, it was nearly imperceptible, a subtle shift in the shadows near the window. The artist paused, holding their breath, and tilted their head. The moonlight seemed to dance, weaving delicate threads of silver that glimmered faintly in the air. They blinked, and the threads remained, faint yet alive, twisting and curling like tiny rivers of light. Curiosity stirred in the artist's chest. They had seen many strange and wonderful things in the quiet of the night before, but this felt different. These threads of moonlight moved as though they had intent, guiding the eye, beckoning attention without sound. The artist rose from the chair slowly, moving toward the center of the room, feeling the wooden floor cool under their bare feet. The threads twined around their ankles lightly, brushing like whispered breath, and a soft warmth spread through their chest, calming a restlessness that had lingered for many nights. The studio, once familiar and static, now felt alive. Every object seemed to hold a secret. The brushes and paints, the scattered sketchbooks, even the chipped ceramic cup on the table were part of a quiet dialogue, waiting for someone to notice. The artist reached out, touching the edge of a canvas, and felt the faint hum of energy beneath their fingertips. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a thrill of wonder through them slowly. As though guided by invisible hands, the artist began to move around the room. Their gaze lingered on small details they had never truly seen before. A tiny crack in the frame of the window, the way the dust motes glowed like floating stars in the moonlight, the delicate pattern of dried paint on the edge of a palette. Each detail seemed significant, as though the night itself had chosen them to be noticed, chosen them to be celebrated in quiet reverence. It was then that the whispers began, not sounds exactly, but impressions, subtle and fleeting, a soft tug at the mind, like the faintest brush of silk against skin, a gentle suggestion of shapes, colors, and movement, almost forming into words, but dissolving before they could be fully understood. The artist felt no fear, only curiosity and a growing sense of peace. They followed the threads of moonlight across the room, letting the whispers guide their steps, each movement deliberate yet dreamlike, as though walking through a half-remembered memory. At the far corner of the studio, a small sketchbook lay open, abandoned during the day. The pages fluttered slightly, as if caught in a gentle breeze that existed only within the studio. The artist approached it and noticed a half-finished sketch of a tree, delicate and fragile, bathed in the same silvery light that filled the room. As they looked closer, the edges of the drawing shimmered faintly, and the whispers seemed to gather around it, circling, encouraging. The artist traced the lines with their fingers, feeling the texture of the paper and the faint vibrations of the unseen energy that filled the air. A sense of wonder settled over the artist, warm and expansive. They realized that the night was not merely a backdrop for their work. It was a living presence, a companion that offered guidance and inspiration without speaking a single word. The threads of light wove through the studio, connecting canvases, brushes, and sketchbooks in a quiet, luminous web. Every movement, every detail felt infused with significance. Even the smallest object, a dropped pencil, a smudge of paint, seemed to hold a story waiting to be told. With deliberate care, the artist picked up a brush and dipped it lightly into a pool of silver paint. They began to trace the faint glimmers of moonlight across the surface of a canvas, following the flow of the threads as they weaved and twisted in the air. The strokes were gentle, delicate, almost meditative, and the artist felt their own breath sync with the rhythm of the night. Each mark on the canvas seemed to hum softly, resonating with the quiet energy that filled the room, as though the very act of creation was a conversation with the moonlight itself. Time slipped away unnoticed. Minutes, hours, none of it mattered. The artist moved between canvases, sketchbooks, and brushes, letting the whispers guide their hand, letting the threads of light reveal patterns and shapes that had existed only in imagination. The studio glowed softly, bathed in silver light, and the artist felt a serene detachment from the constraints of the day, from the world beyond the walls. Everything that mattered existed here, in this quiet interplay of light, shadow, and gentle motion. At one point, the artist paused and closed their eyes, allowing the moonlight and whispers to fill their senses completely. In the darkness behind their eyelids, they could see shifting form trees swaying in a soft breeze, streams of liquid light flowing across distant hills, and figures moving gracefully through these dreamlike landscapes. The whispers seemed to carry the essence of these visions, translating them into gentle inspiration for the hand that had once rested idle. The artist smiled softly, feeling a deep connection to a world both imagined and real, a world that existed just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. The whispers guided the artist toward a small table by the window. Upon it lay a tiny collection of natural objects, a feather, a smooth stone, a single dried flower. The artist picked up the feather, holding it lightly between thumb and forefinger, marveling at its delicate structure, the way the moonlight passed through the fine strands, illuminating a hidden pattern of subtle colors. The whispers seemed to suggest that even these smallest, most overlooked things held meaning, that beauty and inspiration could be found in the most humble of objects. Encouraged by this quiet revelation, the artist returned to their canvas, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The brush moved effortlessly, tracing shapes and lines inspired by the smallest details, guided by the luminous threads that danced and curled in the air. The studio felt alive with possibility, as though every object, every shadow, and every flicker of light contributed to a larger harmony. The artist worked without hurry, savoring the slow unfolding of creation, letting intuition and moonlight lead the way. Hours passed in this gentle rhythm. The whispers never became loud or insistent. They remained soft and fleeting, like a breeze brushing across the surface of water. And yet their presence was profound. The artist felt as though they were not alone, as though the night itself had chosen to be a companion, guiding and encouraging without demand or expectation. It was a companionship built on trust, a quiet understanding between creator and the subtle magic of the world. Eventually, the artist stepped back from the canvas and observed their work. The painting, once a simple composition, now seemed imbued with a gentle life of its own. The threads of moonlight woven through the studio seemed to linger on the surface, giving the image a soft glow, as though it had captured a fragment of the night itself. The artist felt a quiet satisfaction, not born of accomplishment or recognition, but of connection to the stillness, to the whispers, to the slow, gentle pulse of creativity that had guided every stroke as the night moved toward its deepest hours. The artist sank into a chair by the window, letting the soft glow of moonlight wash over them. The whispers faded gradually, leaving behind only a sense of peace and calm, a gentle assurance that inspiration would continue to flow, whether in the waking world or in dreams yet to come. The artist's eyelids grew heavy, and their mind began to drift, carried softly toward the threshold between wakefulness and sleep. And so, in the quiet, luminous embrace of the moonlit studio, the artist allowed themselves to surrender to the gentle pull of dreams. The threads of light lingered, shimmering faintly around canvases and brushes, and the whispers, now faint and distant, seemed to murmur a final, soft invitation. to rest, to imagine, and to awaken once more to the beauty that awaited in both night and day. The night's muse. The night deepened further, and the moon hung heavy in the sky, spilling silver light across the artist's studio. The quiet hum of the room had grown softer now, like the very walls were holding their breath in anticipation. The threads of moonlight that had danced earlier had settled into a delicate shimmer, lingering over the edges of canvases, brushes, and scattered sketchbooks. The air itself felt charged with possibility, a subtle vibration that seemed to resonate in the spaces between the objects, and in the spaces between thoughts. As the artist leaned closer to the canvas, their eyes caught a movement that did not belong to shadow or light alone. For a moment, they thought it might be the trick of the moon through the glass, the flutter of a curtain, or the twitch of a sleeping cat somewhere beyond the studio. But it was something else entirely. A presence, soft, intangible, and serene, seemed to hover near the edge of the moonlit threads. It did not speak, yet the artist felt a quiet urging, as if the room itself had conjured a companion, a gentle guide through the quiet hours. The artist blinked slowly, uncertain if their eyes were adjusting to the subtle changes of night, or if something magical had truly entered the studio. And then they saw it more clearly, a faint silhouette, luminous yet ethereal, drifting with grace. Its shape was delicate, almost fluid, like a figure drawn in silver mist. Its presence brought no fear, only a gentle calm, a sense that this muse, whatever it was, had come to offer inspiration, guidance, and companionship in the silence of the night. The artist felt their heart beat slower, synchronized with the rhythm of the room and the soft radiance that now filled the studio. The muse did not approach directly, did not speak in words, yet the artist understood its intent. It hovered near the canvas, gesturing subtly toward details, offering suggestions not with instruction, but with gentle suggestion. Every movement of the muse seemed to infuse the air with calm energy, nudging the artist's imagination into motion, awakening thoughts that had lingered quietly at the edges of consciousness. With a deep, steadying breath, the artist picked up a brush once more. The first stroke felt like a dialogue, the brush meeting canvas, the moonlight glimmering on paint, the whisper of the muse guiding, unseen but profoundly present. The lines flowed smoothly, effortlessly, as if the artist and the muse were one in this quiet exchange. Shapes and forms that had been only half formed in sketches began to take shape, flowing silhouettes, gentle curves, landscapes tinged with silver light, reflections of the night's magic distilled onto the surface of the canvas. The muse hovered closer, moving with a fluid grace, its presence almost tangible now. The artist could feel it in the subtle air currents around their fingers, in the way the threads of moonlight pulsed and twined in response to the brushstrokes. Though it had no voice, the muse seemed to hum with quiet energy, an inaudible song that resonated with creativity and peace. Each stroke of the brush, each careful blending of color, was met with this silent encouragement. a reassurance that the night itself was pleased with the unfolding work. As the painting grew, the studio seemed to transform. The edges of the room softened and stretched, walls blending into shadow, floorboards fading into the glow of the moon. It was as if the entire space had become a canvas itself, a fluid landscape of light and possibility. The artist felt weightless, their movements light and unburdened, drifting between thought and action with a grace they had never experienced in daylight hours. Each detail on the canvas felt alive, responding to the subtle guidance of the muse, shimmering faintly with a silver glow, as if imbued with moonlight itself. Time became a gentle, almost meaningless concept. Minutes and hours merged, marked only by the steady climb of the moon across the night sky. The artist felt a profound sense of intimacy with their work, a connection that went beyond technique or skill. It was a communion, a quiet understanding between the artist, the muse, and the night itself. The colors on the canvas seemed to pulse with soft life. Shadows stretched and curved in harmony with the artist's brush, and every small detail, the feather on the table, the chipped cup of brushes, the dust floating lazily in the air, felt part of a larger, luminous tapestry. Occasionally, the artist would pause and close their eyes, allowing the presence of the muse to guide their thoughts. In the darkness behind their eyelids, visions unfolded, vast landscapes bathed in silver, rivers of light flowing through forests, floating islands of soft clouds and sparkling stars. Figures moved gracefully in these dreamlike scenes, their forms flowing like liquid light, carrying the same calm energy that the muse brought into the studio. Each vision left an imprint on the artist's mind, shaping brushstrokes and blending colors even when the eyes were closed. The artist felt a serene joy, a quiet elation that came not from external reward, but from the pure act of creation. The muse's presence was a reminder that inspiration could be gentle, subtle, and patient, arriving not as a sudden spark, but as a continuous soft current, guiding the hand and heart with quiet wisdom. The night had become more than a backdrop. It was a partner, a living, breathing collaborator in the act of making, teaching the artist to listen, to follow, and to trust the slow unfolding of imagination. At one point, the artist's gaze fell to a small sketchbook left open on a nearby shelf. The pages seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, as though the muse had touched them with invisible fingers. Curiosity urged the artist forward, and they gently flipped through the sketches. Each image was imbued with a new depth, lines and shapes vibrating softly, waiting to be translated onto canvas. The artist's fingers traced the outlines, absorbing the subtle rhythm and energy of each drawing, feeling the quiet pulse of inspiration that the muse had woven into them. The painting before them continued to evolve, transforming from a simple depiction of night into a luminous world of serenity and light. Trees swayed in gentle, impossible rhythms. Water shimmered with ethereal reflections, and distant landscapes glimmered with the soft glow of moonlight. The figure in the painting, the imagined observer of this quiet world, seemed almost alive, moving with a fluid grace, guided by unseen hands that mirrored the artist's own movements. Finally, the artist paused completely, stepping back to observe the work. The studio, bathed in silver glow, felt like a sacred space, a place where creativity and calm intertwined seamlessly. The muse hovered for a moment longer, its presence reassuring and gentle, then slowly began to fade, dissolving into the threads of moonlight that still lingered across the room. The artist felt no loss, only gratitude and serenity, a deep understanding that the muse had not abandoned them but had become a quiet part of the night, a subtle guide that could be felt even in absence. The brush was set down, the palette left beside the easel, and the artist sank into the chair by the window. The moonlight fell softly on their face, the threads of light weaving through the room in delicate patterns. The whispers of the night had quieted now, leaving a profound sense of peace. The studio was still, yet vibrant with the quiet echoes of creation. Each object and shadow, a reminder of the night's magic. As the artist's eyelids grew heavy, they felt a gentle pull toward rest, carried by the serene energy of the muse and the soft glow of moonlight. Their thoughts drifted like the shimmering threads that had guided them, blending imagination, memory, and quiet anticipation into a gentle tapestry of calm. In this luminous stillness, the artist understood that inspiration was never hurried or forced. It arrived gently, persistently, and patiently, like the quiet rise of moonlight over sleeping rooftops. And so, in the presence of the night's muse, the artist allowed themselves to surrender, leaning back in the chair and letting their mind float toward dreams. The studio remained bathed in silver, canvases, and sketchbooks glimmering faintly, and the whispers of the night promised that creation, wonder, and calm would always return with the gentle pull of moonlight. The bridge between wake and sleep. The night had grown still, yet the studio seemed to breathe with a quiet, hidden life. Shadows no longer simply fell across the walls, they shifted and curved, stretching into gentle patterns that mirrored the rhythm of the artist's own breath. Moonlight poured through the windows in silver streams, catching on the edges of canvases and the soft bristles of brushes, scattering light in tiny luminous threads that hovered, almost floating, above the wooden floor. The studio, once familiar and grounded, now felt weightless, as though it existed both in the real world and in some delicate, unseen dreamscape. The artist moved slowly, deliberately, toward the window, their bare feet brushing against the cool wood. A soft wind stirred the curtains, letting them sway like gentle dancers in the night. The moonlight glinted off the folds of fabric, tracing silvery arcs and curves that seemed almost deliberate, as if the room itself were performing a quiet ritual of its own. The artist felt a curious serenity, a sense that everything around them, the brushes, the sketches, the scattered trinkets, was part of a living, breathing universe intimately connected to their own heart and mind. They paused by the window and inhaled the night air, feeling its cool embrace fill their lungs. Outside, the world was hushed. Trees swayed gently, rooftops glimmered in the faint light, and the stars shone faintly, distant yet familiar companions. The artist's gaze softened, and their thoughts began to drift. The painting they had been working on earlier shimmered faintly under the moonlight, the brushstrokes almost pulsating, as though imbued with a gentle energy. It was not simply paint on canvas. It was a reflection of the night itself, a subtle echo of the whispers and threads that had guided them through hours of quiet creation. With a careful hand, the artist turned away from the window and sank into a low, comfortable chair near the center of the studio. They allowed their eyes to wander over the familiar clutter of their surroundings, seeing each object anew. The brushes, the palette, the sketchbooks, the tiny trinkets all seemed to hold a soft radiance, a quiet glow that harmonized with the rhythm of the moonlight. The shadows between objects were no longer merely absence. They had texture, movement, a gentle depth that made the room feel alive. Slowly, the artists set down their brush, letting their hands rest in their lap. The air around them felt charged with a subtle vibration, like the soft resonance of a bell struck gently. It was neither loud nor intrusive, only a quiet hum that resonated with the heartbeat of the studio itself. The artist closed their eyes, allowing the moonlight to wash over their face and the gentle rhythm of their breath to synchronize with the soft pulse of the room. In that moment, the boundaries between reality and dream began to blur. The walls of the studio seemed to soften, their edges dissolving into the silver glow that filled the space. The floor beneath the artist's feet shimmered faintly, as though made of liquid light, reflecting the threads of moonlight that twined and curled lazily through the air. Even the objects around them appeared lighter. More fluid, the brushes seemed to float, the sketchbooks shifted slightly as if breathing, and the paint on the palette shimmered with a life of its own. The artist felt themselves drifting in response, their body relaxed, their mind suspended in a delicate balance between wakefulness and the gentle pull of sleep, faint and almost imperceptible, brushing against the edges of perception. They were not voices in the ordinary sense, but impressions, subtle nudges, fleeting currents of thought and sensation that guided the artist's imagination. Shapes formed and dissolved behind closed eyelids, rivers of silver light, swaying trees, distant hills under moonlit skies. The artist allowed their mind to follow these visions, flowing with them as one might follow the gentle drift of a boat across a still, starlit lake. The painting on the easel seemed to respond to this quiet state. Lines that had once been static began to shimmer and stretch, colors softening and blending, forms shifting with a gentle fluidity. It was as though the studio itself had become an extension of the artist's dream, a bridge between the conscious act of creation and the unconscious world of imagination. Every object, every shadow, every thread of moonlight was part of this subtle dialogue, a quiet collaboration that required no words. The artist felt their eyelids grow heavy, yet their mind remained alert in the most delicate way. They were aware of their body resting in the chair, of the cool night air brushing against their skin, and of the soft threads of light weaving through the studio. But simultaneously, they were aware of another dimensional world of gentle forms and luminescent patterns, existing alongside the tangible, physical room. Here, in this in-between space, creativity flowed effortlessly, unhurried and infinite, reaching for a small sketchbook on the table. The artist allowed their fingers to glide over its textured pages. Shapes began to form under their touch, not through conscious planning, but through a quiet, intuitive guidance that seemed to come from the night itself. Lines curved naturally, colors appeared without effort, and images that had existed only in fleeting thought became tangible on the page. The whispers encouraged them softly, suggesting subtle adjustments, small flourishes that brought the sketches to life, all without breaking the serene rhythm of the moment. The minutes slipped by like water over smooth stones. The artist's breath grew slower, deeper, and more harmonious with the soft pulse of the room. The threads of moonlight, delicate and fluid, wrapped themselves around the edges of canvases and sketchbooks, knitting the space together in a gentle embrace. The shadows shifted ever so slightly, forming shapes that resembled abstract figures, landscapes, and flowing streams of light, hinting at a world that existed in parallel to the waking one. The artist felt a profound sense of surrender. The busy thoughts of the detha, worries, the plans, the endless to-dos were no longer present. All that mattered was the delicate bridge between wakefulness and sleep, a liminal space where creation and dreaming intertwined. It was a quiet balance, a perfect stillness that invited the mind to wander freely, to explore without expectation, to simply exist in the luminous embrace of the night as the night stretched onward. The studio seemed to breathe in gentle rhythm with the artist. Every object, every surface, every shadow became part of a soft symphony of light and quiet motion. The threads of moonlight shimmered like liquid silver, swirling in arcs that echoed the rise and fall of the artist's chest. Even the floor seemed to pulse slightly underfoot, a subtle vibration that connected them to the heart of the studio, to the rhythm of the night itself. Finally, the artist allowed their head to rest against the back of the chair, their eyes closing completely. The whispers faded into faint echoes, lingering only at the edges of awareness, while the moonlight bathed the studio in its gentle, unwavering glow. The painting on the easel, the sketches on the table, the brushes and paletot seemed to shimmer softly, infused with the calm energy that flowed through the artist's mind and body. In this delicate, suspended moment, the artist felt the first true stirrings of sleep, a gentle drift into the realm of dreams. The studio, the moonlight, the lingering threads of whispers all guided them softly, reassuringly, toward rest. It was a bridge between the conscious act of creating and the unconscious world of imagination, a quiet passage that promised renewal, serenity, and subtle inspiration for the night to come. And so, in the luminous, breathing embrace of the moonlit studio, the artist let themselves drift, surrendering fully to the gentle pull of sleep. The night continued its quiet vigil, stars twinkling faintly beyond the windows, and the soft threads of moonlight lingered, a faithful companion guiding the mind into a world of calm dreams and serene creativity. Dreams of color and light. The world of the studio began to blur and dissolve as the artist drifted further into sleep, carried by the soft rhythm of their own breath and the gentle pull of moonlight. Shadows melted into silver pools, furniture softened at the edges, and the familiar wooden floor seemed to ripple like water beneath their feet. The whispers of the night had faded into a faint echo, leaving only the luminous threads of moonlight to guide the artist into a space between reality and dream, a world entirely of color, light, and quiet wonder. In this realm, shapes flowed like liquid, blending seamlessly from one into another. Trees swayed in slow, undulating arcs, their leaves glimmering with colors that did not exist in the waking world's soft violets, deep emeralds touched with silver, and pale blues that shimmered with a gentle inner light. Rivers flowed like streams of liquid crystal, reflecting skies filled with countless moons and stars that pulsed softly in rhythm with the artist's heartbeat. Each step the artist took left a faint trail of color, a whisper of presence that lingered in the air before fading into the luminous landscape. The artist's hands moved instinctively, shaping the world around them even in sleep. A brush of thought became a tree, a flicker of imagination became a river, and a fleeting emotion became a bloom of light. The studio's tools, the brushes, palettes, and sketchbooks had followed the artist into this dream world, transformed now into delicate instruments of creation, each imbued with a soft, radiant energy that responded to the touch of the artist's mind. Even the simplest gestures, touching a leaf, dipping fingers into a stream of light, produced subtle ripples of color and motion that extended far beyond their immediate surroundings. Figures appeared in the dream, but not in any conventional form. They were gentle, abstract presences, shimmering and fluid, moving gracefully through the landscape. They did not speak, yet the artist understood them perfectly. Each figure seemed to embody a fragment of the night, a trace of inspiration, a whisper of creative thought. One approached and extended a faint hand, leaving a trail of luminous particles in its wake, inviting the artist to follow. They walked together through meadows of color, across bridges of translucent light, and into forests where the trees sang softly in harmony with the shimmering rivers. The sensation of creation was absolute. The artist felt neither effort nor hesitation, only a quiet, boundless freedom. Colors responded instantly to thought. Lines shaped themselves according to imagination, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with a gentle energy that guided every movement. The dream world was not static. It pulsed and flowed, shifting in response to the artist's emotions and intentions. It was as if the very essence of creativity had been distilled into this place, a luminous garden where the mind could wander unbounded and the soul could rest fully. Small details emerged, magical in their subtlety. Tiny, luminescent creatures, delicate and translucent, flitted along the rivers and between the trees. Their movements left faint trails of color in the air, ephemeral patterns that the artist traced instinctively with their hands. Flowers bloomed in slow motion, petals unfurling to reveal glimmers of light that changed hue with each passing heartbeat. Rocks and stones glimmered with inner radiance, and the sky above shifted between soft pastels and deep, velvety indigo, punctuated with glowing constellations that seemed to move deliberately, guiding the eye along invisible paths. The artist paused beside a river of liquid moonlight, letting their fingers skim its surface. Ripples expanded outward, carrying tiny sparks of light that twined into patterns across the landscape. It was a place where even the smallest gesture had meaning, where quiet observation became creation, and where the act of seeing and feeling was inseparable from the act of making. The artist realized with serene joy that here, in this luminous dream world, the boundaries between imagination and reality no longer existed. They were both observer and creator, participant and witness, fully immersed in the flow of quiet magic. Figures appeared again, more clearly now gentle companions that seemed to embody fragments of memory, creativity, and dream. One shimmered like a cloud of silver, another like a flowing river of deep blue, and yet another glowed softly like a cluster of stars. They moved gracefully, guiding the artist toward places of subtle beauty. A glade filled with floating petals that refracted moonlight in tiny rainbows. A hill that rose gently into a sky of infinite color. A bridge of woven light that arched over a river flowing with liquid silver. Each location seemed to offer a fragment of inspiration, a suggestion of a story yet to be told, a feeling yet to be captured on canvas. The artist's heart expanded with a quiet, radiant warmth. There was no hurry, no pressure, only the gentle, continuous flow of creation and wonder. Every step, every movement, every glance revealed new possibilities, shapes, and colors that existed only for a moment before fading and reforming in new patterns. Even the act of walking through this dream world felt creative, a dance between perception and imagination, a harmonious rhythm in which the artist was entirely immersed at one point. The artist found themselves standing on a small hilltop overlooking a vast, luminous landscape. Below, rivers of light twisted and turned, forests shimmered softly, and distant mountains glowed with a gentle inner luminescence. The stars above pulsed in harmony with the landscape, their light tracing subtle paths across the sky, guiding the eye to points of quiet beauty. The artist felt a profound sense of connection, not only to this dream world, but to the night, the moonlight, the studio, and the life that awaited when they awoke. A gentle wind brushed past, carrying the faintest hints of music, not audible in the conventional sense, but felt deeply in the mind and heart. Notes of color and light danced in the air, swirling around the artist, weaving into the rivers, trees, and flowers. It was a lullaby of creation, soft and enduring, a song of peace and inspiration that seemed to exist for no purpose other than the joy of being. The artist closed their eyes briefly, letting the song wash over them, feeling their mind and body relax into the embrace of the dream. Time in this dream world flowed differently. Hours and minutes had no meaning. Only the slow, deliberate unfolding of light and color mattered. The artist wandered through forests and meadows, across rivers and hills, accompanied by the shimmering figures, tracing shapes and patterns, observing details, and participating in the creation of beauty that existed for its own quiet sake. Each interaction left a mark, a bloom of light, a ripple across the river, a subtle shift in the constellations above, but nothing felt permanent or constrained. Everything was transient, fluid, and luminous, reflecting the ephemeral nature of dreams and the gentle pulse of imagination. Eventually, the artist found a quiet glade, soft and inviting, where the colors and light coalesced into a gentle, encompassing glow. They sank to the ground, feeling the soft texture of light beneath them, the warmth of the dream world cradling their body and mind. The shimmering figures gathered nearby, hovering silently, offering their quiet presence as companions and witnesses. The artist felt a deep serenity, a peaceful understanding that creation, beauty, and inspiration were never bound to a single place or moment. They flowed freely, carried by imagination, guided by intention, and embraced fully in the quiet of the night. And so, in the heart of this luminous, flowing dream world, the artist allowed themselves to drift even further into sleep. Every breath, every heartbeat, every glance at the shimmering rivers and glowing trees became part of a gentle rhythm that carried them deeper into rest. The studio, the moonlight, the threads of whispers, and the dreamlike landscape all intertwined, forming a seamless, luminous tapestry that promised renewal, inspiration, and the soft, enduring joy of creation. The quiet awakening. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the horizon, soft and delicate, brushing the world with pale gold and tender pinks that mingled seamlessly in the sky. The moon, having lingered throughout the night, now receded gracefully, leaving faint traces of silver across the studio. Shadows softened and lengthened, folding over one another in gentle waves that stretched across the floor, resting on canvases, brushes, and scattered sketchbooks. The studio seemed to breathe in the changing light, as if it too were aware that the night's magic was slowly yielding to the calm warmth of morning. The artist stirred gently, eyelids lifting slowly, like petals opening to greet the sun. The familiar room appeared different somehow, as though imbued with subtle enchantment. Every object, the wooden floor, the easel, the palettes, the brushes seemed touched by a faint glow, a lingering echo of the moonlight that had guided the night's creation. Canvases shimmered softly in the morning light, revealing the delicate layers of color and subtle textures shaped by hours of attentive work. Even the dust motes, hovering in the sunlight, seemed alive, drifting lazily like tiny stars caught in the golden glow, rising slowly from the chair. The artist stretched with careful awareness, feeling each movement in the body as it reacquainted itself with wakefulness. Their bare feet brushed softly against the wooden floor, grounding them in the familiar texture, yet their mind still lingered in the fluid, luminous dream world. Outside, the town was waking. Birds stirred in the trees. The faint creak of doors and shutters punctuated the still morning air, and the scent of dew and fresh earth drifted faintly through the open window. It was a world both ordinary and extraordinary, touched subtly by the residue of the night's magic. The artist moved to the window, letting the first rays of sunlight spill across their face. The sky, now painted with gentle streaks of peach and lavender, mirrored the delicate luminosity of the dream they had left behind. Their heart felt light, serene, carrying a quiet satisfaction born not of accomplishment, but of the deep connection between imagination and reality. The threads of moonlight, though vanished from the studio, seemed to echo faintly in the memory of their senses, leaving a lingering warmth and calm in the chest. Returning to the easel, the artist paused, gazing at the painting that had been touched by both night and dream. The brushstrokes seemed alive, soft yet vibrant, shimmering faintly in the dawn. The form's delicate rivers, trees swaying, with impossible fluidity. Figures that had once floated in dreams now rested firmly on canvas, captured not as rigid images, but as living echoes of imagination. The artist's fingers brushed lightly over the edge of the painting, tracing the contours with reverent care, feeling the textures that held fragments of the night's whispers and inspiration around the studio. Reminders of the dream world remained. A small feather on the table glowed faintly, capturing the first morning light, while an open sketchbook displayed pages filled with soft shapes and flowing lines. Each page seemed infused with gentle energy, a testament to the visions that had emerged from sleep. The brushes, still slightly damp from the last night's work, rested naturally in their cups, their bristles soft and ready to guide the artist once more. Even the air seemed imbued with faint resonance, carrying echoes of the gentle whispers that had guided creation through the hours of moonlight. The artist sank back into the chair, closing their eyes briefly to let the memory of the dream world wash over them. They could see, vividly behind closed lids, the rivers of liquid silver, the glowing trees, the floating petals, and the ethereal figures that had guided them. Every detail, no matter how fleeting, returned in memory with clarity. The subtle glimmer of light reflected on a river, the soft ripple of color when a brush moved through a canvas, the serene rhythm of the night itself. It was a memory not merely of images, but of sensation, of a complete immersion in a world where creation and dreaming were inseparable. Opening their eyes, the artist felt a sense of quiet reverence. Inspiration, they realized, did not arrive in bursts or demands. It flowed gently, persistently, in moments of observation, reflection, and openness. The dream world had not ended. It had become a part of the waking studio, infused subtly into every object, shadow, and beam of light. Even the simplest act, touching a brush, lifting a sketchbook, observing a faint glimmer on the floor, was now infused with meaning, a continuation of the dialogue between imagination and reality. The artist rose, moving slowly through the room. Each step was deliberate, each movement gentle. The chipped ceramic cup that held brushes gleamed faintly, catching the sunlight in tiny, unexpected angles. The scattered sketchbooks revealed patterns that had been invisible in the dark of night, showing traces of thought and inspiration, as though the studio itself were speaking in a silent, persistent language. The wooden floor beneath their feet reflected the soft interplay of shadow and light, and the artist felt a profound connection to the space, as though it were alive, breathing, and extending its calm energy to them. Returning to the easel, the artist picked up a brush, testing its tip lightly on a scrap of paper. The motion felt fluid, instinctive. Colors responded instantly, blending naturally, carrying echoes of the night's luminous dreamscape. Every line and stroke seemed guided by the memory of ethereal rivers, glowing trees, and shimmering figures. Even the faintest gesture, a trace of light along a blank page, felt significant, a small thread connecting the inspiration of dreams to the tangible reality of the studio. The minutes stretched, quiet and unhurried, filled with the soft rhythm of movement and reflection. The artist observed the painting again, noticing subtle shifts in hue and texture in the morning light, details that had emerged in the night and were now crystallized on canvas. The once fluid dream forms had settled into enduring beauty, carrying with them the serenity and wonder of the night. The artist's hands hovered over brush and palette, absorbing the gentle energy, aware that each stroke would be infused with both memory and presence. Eventually, the artist paused and moved toward the window once more. Outside, the town had fully awakened, sunlight spilling across rooftops, streets, and trees. Birds moved energetically through the branches, and a faint breeze carried the scent of earth, flowers, and morning dew. The artist inhaled deeply, feeling the pulse of life in the ordinary world, tempered by the serene, luminous energy of the night's dreams. Inspiration, they realized, was not limited to the extraordinary. It could flow through the everyday, subtle and persistent, waiting to be noticed, appreciated, and nurtured. Sitting again in the chair, the artist reflected on the continuity between dream and reality. The night had offered guidance, imagination, and quiet companionship, all wrapped in luminous whispers and gentle moonlight. The day promised action, creation, and presence, a seamless extension of what had been experienced in sleep. Everything's the brushes, the canvases. The studio itself was alive with quiet possibility, ready to be explored, observed, and honored. The artist set down the brush finally, closing their eyes and feeling the soft warmth of morning envelop them. A sense of gratitude and serenity filled the heart. Gratitude for the night, for dreams, for the quiet guidance of unseen muses, and for the gentle bridge between imagination and waking life. Inspiration, they understood, was a living current, subtle yet enduring, capable of flowing freely through both night and day, guiding thought, movement, and creation as the sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the room. The artist allowed themselves a deep, satisfying breath. They were awake, yet still connected to the dream world, the studio, and the quiet magic that had accompanied them through the night. The whispers and threads of moonlight had faded, but their essence lingered. A quiet echo in the mind, a gentle glow in the heart, and a promise that creativity, beauty, and calm would always return. The artist rose fully, moving gently through the studio, touching brushes and canvases with deliberate reverence, taking in the quiet splendor of the morning. Each object, every shadow, every glimmer of light reminded them that creation was a living, breathing act, flowing naturally from observation, reflection, and imagination. The day awaited, full of possibility, yet tempered with the gentle rhythm and serenity of the night just past. And so, the artist began their morning, carrying the calm, inspiration, and quiet joy of moonlit sleep into waking life. The studio remained a sanctuary of light, color, and imagination, a place where dreams and reality coexisted harmoniously, and where every brushstroke, every sketch, every quiet moment became an act of connection to the world, to the self, and to the luminous, enduring pulse of creativity itself. And now, dear listener, our journey with the artist gently comes to a pause. The moonlight has faded, but its calm glow lingers in your mind. The whispers of creativity, of quiet dreams, and of serene inspiration remain with you. Carry this peace with you as you drift into sleep, knowing that imagination, wonder, and gentle magic are always just a breath away. Thank you for joining us tonight on Whispers of the Night, and until next time, may your dreams be soft, luminous, and serene.